Hello, my name is Greg Harradine, and in this video I'm going to be discussing the transcendental buffoonery of what probably is my favourite novel of all time. I'm talking about James Joyce's masterpiece, Ulysses. Now, this video is a bit of a treat for me. It's the 20th episode of my series Good Art, Bad Art, where I usually discuss music and talk about whether a certain composition or album is an example of good art or bad art. But every now and then I delve into literature, which is a great love of mine. For episode 10, I looked at Lolita, and now I'm treating myself to talking about Ulysses. Usually these videos are 8 minutes long, filmed in one take, but I'm doing a double length today, 16 minutes, filmed in one take. And I'm treating myself also to a glass of white wine. James Joyce enjoyed a bit of tippling every now and then, pretty regularly, I think, and he was a fan of white wine. He called it electricity. It stimulated him, I guess. So let's hope it does the same for me. Cheers. So here's the plan. Here's the game plan. First, I'm going to share some quotes from critics. Some who loved Ulysses and some who hated Ulysses, because it is a really divisive book. I'll share some thoughts there, and then I'll go on to my own thoughts about why I think this is a truly outstanding example of great art. At the end of the video, I'll give my score out of 100, so stick around for that. And if you enjoyed the video, please do subscribe. So, on to James Joyce's Ulysses, some critical opinion. And we'll find out in these quotes why I'm talking about the transcendental buffoonery. Why have I used that quote in the title? We'll come on to that. So, let's start with some negative criticism. Many people hated this book for various reasons. Some thought it was disgusting, pornographic. Some thought it was far too complicated. Others just thought it was a joke, really. Anyway, here we go. Here's a fantastic quote. Newspaper editor James Douglas, he called Ulysses the most infamously obscene book in ancient or modern literature. All the secret sewers of vice are canalized in its flood of unimaginable thoughts, images, and pornographic words. I love that. He talks about the secret sewers being canalized, turned into canals, the sewers raised up into the open air, made into canals. He goes on, and its unclean lunacies are larded with appalling and revolting blasphemies directed against the Christian religion and against the name of Christ, blasphemies hitherto associated with the most degraded orgies of Satanism and the Black Mass. Wow. I mean, I think it's safe to say that probably James Douglas was a religious man, and he didn't like Joyce's freedom with language and freedom to say what he thinks about the church. Not a fan, was Douglas. Okay. Next, Virginia Woolf. Fantastic novelist, of course. Just a short quote. She said, Ulysses was a memorable catastrophe. Immense in daring, terrific in disaster. Not a fan. She didn't rate it. Surprisingly. Maybe she was jealous. Arnold Bennett, an English novelist, wrote in 1922, the year the book came out, that Joyce apparently thinks there is something truly artistic and high-minded in playing the lout to the innocent and defenceless reader. As a fact, there isn't. So Bennett thought Joyce was playing the lout to the innocent and defenceless reader, as if readers need protecting from James Joyce. Please, Mr. Joyce, stop! Safe to say I disagree with Arnold Bennett. And one more negative quote. The writer and communist revolutionary Karl Radek called Ulysses a heap of dung crawling with worms, photographed by a cinema camera through a microscope. Wow, he really inspired a lot of hatred, didn't he? But sometimes the best works of art do divide people. Anyway, on to some more positive criticism. We come to the English writer John Middleton Murray. Listen out for that phrase that I used earlier, transcendental buffoonery. Stick with me for this. It's a longish quote, but it's fantastic. So, John Middleton Murray called Joyce a genius of the very highest order, strictly comparable to Goethe or Dostoevsky. Ulysses is, fundamentally, an immense, a prodigious self-laceration, the tearing away from himself by a half-demented man of genius, inhibitions and limitations which have grown to be flesh of his flesh. Mr. Joyce has made the superhuman effort to empty the whole of his consciousness into it. Joyce is the man with the bomb who would blow what remains of Europe into the sky. This transcendental buffoonery, this sudden uprush of the vis comica into a world wherein the tragic incompatibility of the practical and the instinctive is embodied, is a very great achievement. And I really do think transcendental buffoonery sums it up in 2 words. We have the transcendental, it really moves you onto another plane if you engage with it at a high level. But it is very, very funny. It is full of buffoonery, and the marriage of the two, the serious and the jovial, the tragic and the comic, we could say, the high-minded and the low-minded, that is wherein its genius lies. A couple of other quotes. I feel it's really worthwhile hearing from some of our best writers about what they thought about Joyce and his writing. Ezra Pound, big fan of Joyce, wrote, "All men should unite to give praise to Ulysses. Those who will not may content themselves with a place in the lower intellectual orders." Harsh. Provocative. T.S. Eliot wrote, "I hold Ulysses to be the most important expression which the present age has found. It is a book to which we are all indebted and from which none of us can escape." And that is very, very true. I've heard so many writers talk about how after Ulysses, how do they continue writing, or what direction did they go in? Because Joyce did all you could do in literature in Ulysses, as we'll get to shortly. Finally, we come to Nabokov, one of my top 3 authors, alongside James Joyce and Jorge Luis Borges. By the way, if you're still watching, which I hope you are, what are your top 3 authors? Let me know. I wasn't sure for many years, but about 5 years ago it coalesced into Joyce, Borges, and Nabokov, and those 3 seem to me to be the pinnacle of my personal literary tastes. Nabokov called Ulysses a divine work of art that will live on despite the academic non-entities who turn it into a collection of symbols or Greek myths. Obviously, Nabokov thought it a lot more than that. He named it the greatest masterpiece of 20th century prose, and he said it towers above the rest of Joyce's writing. Nabokov wasn't a fan of Finnegan's Wake, for example, which he called something like a cold pudding of a book, a persistent snore in the next room. But he said Ulysses has noble originality and a unique lucidity of thought and style. There we go. There are so many of these amazing quotes. I could go on. What I want to do one day is make a video of all the hilariously negative reviews of Ulysses, which I find just wonderful to read. Anyway, why do I love this book so much? Why should you read it if you haven't? Many, many reasons. This is the book of books. In it really can be found all of literature because of Joyce's encyclopedic knowledge and way of incorporating huge reams of thought into this book, drawing upon so many authors of the past. But that wouldn't be enough, would it? That would come across potentially as a bit academic and a bit dry. Joyce fills every page with humour, yeah? And it's not, some of it is clever humour, yeah? Making allusions to things, but plenty of it is humour of the everyday, yeah? If you go into this book with an open heart and a warmness, then you will find humour and laughs aplenty on every page, truly. There's a total honesty, and there's an honesty in how Joyce wrote this. He didn't leave anything out. All of human experience is here, yeah? Again, the best parts of us and the worst parts of us are here, yeah? We have great highs of friendship. We have the lows of everyday life, yeah? Often in books, the authors skip out what are considered boring everyday things, things we have to do. We have to eat, we have to sleep, we have to use the toilet, right? But Joyce includes all these things because they're part of life. It is the quintessential book of Dublin, of course. I've visited Dublin quite recently. I went there with a friend, a good friend, who's living there for a while, and it was wonderful walking around Joyce's city. Although, of course, he was in exile. He moved away from Dublin as a young man. But despite moving away, in fact, I can tell you at the very end of Ulysses, if I find the last page, he signs off with once we reach the famous final few words, yes, I said, yes, I will, yes. Such a positive ending, isn't it? He then writes, Trieste, Zurich, Paris, 1914 to 1921. He wrote this novel in these three places, Trieste, Zurich, and Paris. Didn't write it in Dublin, and yet it's the quintessential book of Dublin. Joyce, I think, said if Dublin was ever destroyed by an earthquake or a war, it could be rebuilt using his book alone. The stylistic variation has to be mentioned. I won't go into all the Homeric parallels, but yes, it is a parallel. Each chapter has its parallel in Homer's Odyssey. Yeah, but I won't go into that. That would take an hour. But I will talk about the stylistic variation, which keeps this book, it just keeps you interested because you never know what the next chapter is going to be like. Yes, some of them are dense and hard to appreciate at first read, but stick with it. I'll just give you a few quick examples because I thought it might be fun. So some people get to certain sections and think, what the hell, this doesn't make any sense, I'll give up. For example, in the Oxen of the Sun chapter, here is one sentence. It's a bit long, bear with me. One sentence, no punctuation. Ready? Universally, that person's acumen is esteemed very little perceptive concerning whatsoever matters are being held as most profitably by mortals with sapience endowed to be studied, who is ignorant of that which the most in doctrine erudite, and certainly by reason of that in them high mind's ornament deserving of veneration, constantly maintain when by general consent they affirm that other circumstances being equal by no exterior splendour, is the prosperity of a nation more efficaciously asserted than by the measure of how far forward may have progressed the tribute of its solicitude for that proliferant continuation which of evils the original, if it be absent when fortunately present, constitutes the certain sign of omnipotent nature's incorrupted benefaction. Snappy, right? Every man's speech, it is not. And you might think, well, this is too complicated for me, I can't keep up. But that's what it's meant to make you feel. Yeah, what Joyce is doing is he's parodying the Latin prose of authors like Tacitus. Yeah. Now I didn't get that myself from reading it through, but I got it through reading about the book. Yes, you have to do, unless you're a genius of Joyce's order, you have to do a lot of reading about this book to understand it. But then you can enjoy these parodies. A few pages later, we get a parody of the sort of prose of Arthurian legend. Let me read you a little bit of that, a short passage. And Sir Leopold, that was the goodliest guest that ever sat in scholars' hall, and that was the meekest man and the kindest that ever laid husbandly hand under hen, and that was the very truest knight of the world, one that ever did minion service to lady gentle, pledged him courtly in the cup. Arthurian prose, more easy to understand. And then we get chapters like the Nausicaa episode, Gertrude MacDowell on the beach, where Leopold Bloom is pleasuring himself while looking at this young lady. This is written in the style of romance novels of the time. Quite hilarious. Here's a little taste. So do you see from this, it's not all complicated and high-minded. The three girlfriends were seated on the rocks, enjoying the evening scene, and the air, which was fresh but not too chilly. Many a time and oft were they wont to come there to that favourite nook, to have a cosy chat besides the sparkling waves and discuss matters feminine, Cissy Caffrey and Edie Boardman, with the baby in the push-car, and Tommy and Jackie Caffrey, two little curly-headed boys dressed in sailor suits with caps to match, and the name HMS Belle-Isle printed on both. So if you haven't read Ulysses and you think it a difficult book, I hope a passage like that makes you reconsider. The two of the main characters, Leopold Bloom, Stephen Dedalus, we get two sides of humanity in a way. We get the high-minded and the low-minded. We get the intellectual, and the more everyday man. And between them, they both have different sides. They're not single-sided characters, but between them, we get all of humanity. And these are two of the best creations, I would say, in all of fiction, Leopold Bloom and Stephen Dedalus. I love them both dearly. Molly Bloom, Leopold's wife, another incredible creation. Her ending soliloquy is just some of the best writing I've ever come across. And some people say men can't write women. Well, what a load of tosh. The best men of genius like Joyce could write women, just like the best women can write men. There's lots of music in Ulysses. Joyce was a huge fan of music. He had a fine tenor voice. And there's music in episodes like the Sirens episode, which really was meant to be music in literary form. But I'm running out of time here. You see, I could go on, but my pre-allotted 16 minutes are almost up. So please, I give this a score, if you've waited around, 98 out of 100. It's my favourite ever book. Go read it now. Cheers.